we can say definitively that religions are all bullshit.
Welcome to Brainstorm.
We have the explicit tag for a reason.
This is a base level argument to a higher level morality.
I get paid to science?
To science as much as one can science.
What the hell was my point?
Trigger warning. The Brainstorm podcast will criticize your most cherished beliefs. We attack nonsense in all its forms and discuss difficult subjects. If you peddle pseudoscience, supernatural woo, or religious dogma, then this is not your safe place. This is the home of hardcore skepticism.
Rene.
Hello.
Brandon.
Hello.
Basit. Our guest host, George.
Hello.
And of course, the always amazing Dave doing sound.
Yeah.
We're here in Roman Empire Studios in Regina, Saskatchewan, and today is February 16th, 2018. Our guest tonight is founder of the Pro-Truth Pledge and author of the Truth Seekers Handbook, Gleb Tsipursky. Thanks for joining us, Gleb.
It's always a pleasure to be on again, Cory. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. I guess one of the reasons that we're having you on this time around is to discuss the new book you got out, the Truth Seekers Handbook. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what is in this book. What is the difference between this and the Pro-Truth Pledge?
Sure. So what the show theme song talks about is recognizing the hard truths. And that's a noble goal. But that's a really hard thing to do. We tend to lie to ourselves. It's very comfortable. It's very easy to do so, and we don't notice it. And we as skeptics tend to try to avoid doing that. But it's so hard to do, and we need to understand why we do it. Why do we tend to lie to ourselves? Why do people tend to believe falsehoods? How do we get other people to change? How do we get ourselves to change? And that all lies in the psychology, in our evolutionary psychology. So the book looks at the evolutionary psychology of what causes us to believe falsehoods. There is a set of thinking and feeling patterns called cognitive biases, which recent research shows are what cause us to make mistakes in evaluating reality. And this book looks at cognitive biases, goes through them, and gives easy, quick, and effective strategies to address these cognitive biases in ourselves and how to address these cognitive biases in others, in all areas of life, from personal relationships to charity to community, all the way through politics. That's what the book is about.
Sounds great. So what is... how does the book break that down? Like, does it go through a list of different biases and how to deal with them, or is it more like a practical application of just dealing with people one-on-one? Oh
gosh, it would be so boring if it was just breaking down the biases. That's what Wikipedia is for. That's not that. So the book actually starts in the basis of our evolutionary background, explains how the mind works. There are two systems of thinking, the autopilot system and the intentional system. That's what recent research shows. So, if you've heard about the subconscious, the superconscious, whatever, the id, that's research that's actually outdated. The idea that we can't access our subconscious, and that's completely separate from who we are. So the autopilot system is the quick, intuitive, habitual system of thinking. That's our gut reactions, our intuitions. And most of us, including skeptics, tend to trust our gut reactions, our intuitions. What's our read on a person? What's our read on an idea? How do we feel about it? That's what we tend to go with, even without noticing it. So that's what we tend to use to evaluate what is accurate, what are the facts.
Right.
Even before we start reasoning and thinking about them. Now, reasoning and thinking belong in the intentional system. That's logic, abstract thinking, numbers, That's not our gut intuitions. But our gut intuitions really shape how we bring our intentional system into play. And so understanding that our gut is where it is, really helps us understand how we should approach these patterns of thinking, because we are evolved for the savanna environment. We're not evolved for the modern day world. So in the savanna environment, our gut can be trusted. So our gut can be trusted on dangerous issues like direct fight or flight responses. That's a very much gut intuitions. And with people well, like the people who are in the room right there in your studio, you know them pretty well. You can read them pretty well. And so you can know when someone's off or not. With people who are new, that's not something we do well at all. We don't read new people well. We tend to think we do because we're used to reading each other, but we don't read new people well. And so our gut intuitions cannot be trusted on new people, and so on. And there are a number of other examples where they can't be trusted. So the book begins with this basic framework. Where can you trust your gut and where can you not trust your gut? And the basic mistake that so many of us make is that when we mistake the feeling of comfort for truth, when we feel comfortable with an idea, when we feel comfortable with a person, with a piece of evidence, we tend to think it's true just because we're comfortable with it.
Right.
But the feeling of comfort is very deceptive, and it often leads us astray. So the book talks about that. That's the fundamental divide, and we can talk about the other stuff. But that's kind of what the book starts with, and how it helps us shape our thinking.
Some of that, it made me think of Daniel Kahneman's book, Fast and Slow Thinking. It's very similar ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow is an excellent book. And so I drew from that, and I drew from a number of other books. So what Daniel Kahneman does is he outlines these thinking errors, and he actually does it in kind of like the more boring style where he breaks them down, each one as a chapter in each. That's not what I do. So what my book does is it talks about actual life situations where you would encounter these errors and how you would address them in these life situations. That's one. Second, my book Daniel Kahneman focuses on the problems. I focus more on the solutions.
Okay.
How do you actually address these thinking errors? There's been quite a lot of research on addressing, it's called, these are cognitive biases. And the research on them is called debiasing. It doesn't have anything to do with stereotypes, doesn't have anything to do with, gender, ethnicity. That's not what debiasing is about in the cognitive psychology literature. Debiasing is how do you get rid of these mental patterns that cause us to make bad decisions, like feeling that something is comfortable and convenient and therefore it is true. Right. So that's what the book focuses on. That's a major difference between Daniel Kahneman's book and my book.
Is it a bias that you think your book is more interesting than his book?
Oh, gosh, no. I think it is much more in-depth, and for many people who are scholarly, it would be quite interesting from the perspective of understanding the science behind how these biases work.
Right.
So that's great for people who want to understand that. For people who want a pragmatic guide to how you apply these things to your everyday life, I don't want to write a book that's already out there. Why would I write the book that Daniel Kahneman already wrote? I want to write a book about how do you apply these things to your daily life in a pragmatic manner. How do you actually live a skeptical life as opposed to, just come together with other skeptics and talk about, isn't it nice to live a skeptical life?
That's what we do.
Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're all supposed to just get together and talk about how right we are?
Yes.
That's not what we do.
That feels very comfortable and convenient.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell you how to apply this in your work life, in your politics, in your relationships, in your communities that aren't with other skeptics. How do you actually live a skeptical life as opposed to just, thinking about skeptical things when you're with other skeptics?
Do you discuss, like you're describing somebody who wants to be more skeptical, figuring out how to overcome their biases. Do you talk at all about how to convince others who are maybe less inclined to worry about their biases, how to convince them?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we as skeptics tend to make a mistake about is how to convince others. We tend to present others with facts and evidence and have arguments. Now, that's all fun and games for us as skeptics, but it just doesn't work for people who aren't skeptics. Otherwise, they would be skeptics. You looking around yourself, you'll probably see that you're maybe like 1 in 100, and that's
more like 1 in a million.
Well, you are 1 in a million, but skeptics are 1 in 100. If you look at the demographics of the population.
Stop trying to convince me with your facts.
Yeah, so looking around at the population, you'll see that skeptics are not what's called neurotypical. Neurotypical is a term that behavioral science and cognitive science experts apply to people who are mainstream in certain areas. So neurotypical refers to how people typically think. Skeptics are not neurotypical.
We're hipsters.
Sure.
No.
We're neurological hipsters.
In a non-scholarly term.
So when Cory orders his clam juice and beer at the bar, do you think the waitress is in her head is going, how neurotypical?
I think so.
Such a neurotypical
That's
joke
exactly
there.
what the waitress thinks.
Sorry. So the average person is neurotypical.
Right. The average person is neurotypical. So you don't convince them by presenting facts and arguments as you would try to convince other skeptics. What the vast majority of people, what they're motivated by is emotions, emotional drivers. So you need to figure out what they're feeling about a topic and why they are believing in a falsehood. So, for example, I published, I talked about this a number of times. There was a situation where there was a student in my class. So I teach at Ohio State University, and there was a student who was really where after I gave a lecture on global warming and global climate change, whatever, he was really rejecting the idea. He came to my office hours afterwards, and I tried to figure out what's going on with him. So what was the source of his concern? And he was criticizing global warming ideas and science as really leading to harmful economic effects for himself and his family. That, there was a plant that closed because of government protections around pollution, and his father lost his job, and he's worried about kind of his economic safety, and he's just saying this is the global climate change science is all an attack on big business. So there we go. We can see where the emotions are. So his emotions from that conversation, is fear and anxiety. So I talked to him about, so that's the kind of the first set of a 5-step process I call EGRIP. Emotions, goals, rapport, information, positive reinforcement. So you get the emotions, then you figure out what goals you two share. So you two share the goals of, it's important to have good economic productivity, and it's important to have good health for people. So I established those goals with him. Then rapport, kind of building up a sense of trust. Rapport refers to trust. So talking to him about, what his dad went through, why that happened, what he's concerned about. So building up that rapport, making sure that his family is healthy, then providing him with information. So here in Ohio, we have really booming green energy sector. And so green energy jobs, I started talking about how that's really a good sector. That might be a good economic future, that jobs like his father had are disappearing, but there's this another set of jobs that, he doesn't have to go against the science on climate change. He can just align with it and also have a good economic future. And that really spoke to him. And I talked as part of that, I talked to him about how I took the pro-truth pledge as someone who is committed to truth and facts, and asked him to hold me accountable for any incorrect statements. But yeah, we talked about the green energy sector in Ohio, how that's really booming. And finally, he aligned. He was really shaken by that. He said, yes, that's really interesting, and I'll have to look into that. And so at the end of it, we go into the P, which is positive reinforcement. So kind of reinforcing him for changing his mind and orienting toward more accurate information accurate evaluation of reality. So that's kind of a 5-step process that I called eGrip, that I describe much more thoroughly in the book in a couple of examples. That is an easy and effective way that you can talk to people who are believing in falsehoods, or false beliefs, basically.
So doesn't it bother you that you convince this student of yours of climate change, for example, in this case, by making an argument that has nothing, like his argument sucks, right? Like, I don't believe in climate change because when a law was passed to try to help climate change, my dad was negatively affected. Like, that has nothing to do with whether or not climate change is real or not. I mean, you can make the same argument as an atheist, right? Oh, well, I believe God exists because it makes me feel really good to think that God exists. Well, that doesn't actually prove anything, right? So does it not piss you off? Because it would piss me off, especially as I was a teacher and I'm trying to teach the student, that I'm making an argument that hasn't, I mean, you're arguing, oh, well, your dad, you can get a green job, blah, blah, blah. Nothing to do with whether climate change is real. Does that not make you angry?
Sure. Well, there are two ways you can think about it. You can be driven by your emotions of being pissed. And that's what we as skeptics typically do.
No.
That's what we skeptics typically do. We're like, oh, we get pissed off at them and we throw more fact arguments their way.
Feel the dark side, Lisa.
Give me one example.
That's one thing you can do. And, I think looking at the recent elections in the UK and the US, we can see where trying to do the same things that we always did and hoping that we would have different outcomes, where they lead to.
I mean, it's a very pragmatic approach. It's very pragmatic, but I just feel like the principle of it, especially in an education environment.
I hear you. You can choose to stand on principles, and and that's a principle. You can be driven by your emotions, choose to stand on principles, or you can say, "Hey, how can we have an outcome where people believe the facts, where people believe what is actually going on, and then look at how people actually are, recognize that other people aren't us. Other people aren't intuitively oriented toward truth and facts." I mean, just getting at the basis of it, our love for truth and facts is an emotion. We are concerned. We care. That's a passion. We are passionate about truth and facts. Other people don't have that passion. So if we have that passion for truth and facts, then we should step up based on our principles and care about truth and passion and help the world orient toward truth and passion, truth and facts in a way that we're passionate about, using effective strategies. Because if we're using the same things that we were using before and they didn't work, what's the point?
I feel like you don't know what I'm going to say. I feel like I had this conversation with my boss like a month ago. Okay. Cause I work as a physicist in a hospital. So I work as a physicist, but with people who are not experts in physics and who are neurotypical. Let's say it that way. And I have these issues because I'm hired to give advice. Like, that's what I'm supposed to give technical advice. And I'll give this advice. I'll say, I think we should do this. And what you're proposing is not going to work because this, that, and the other. Your image quality is going to be shit. Your geometry doesn't work, whatever. We never calibrated that device. Don't do that thing. And everyone will fucking ignore me. I'm the one with 14 years of education in physics, and they will just ignore me for whatever dumb shit comes to their brains. And it drives me batshit. And I'll go to my boss and I'll complain to him. I'll be like, nobody's fucking listening to me. I don't understand. And he's a physicist, and he says, Lisa, what I learned was being right is only 1% of it. The rest of it's all social capital, where people have to like you in order for them to believe this shit you say.
That's why nobody listens to Gumby.
Yeah, or me, okay? Because apparently I'm disliked. But like, I just, but that's so stupid. It makes me lose my brain. So I feel like I totally hear what you're saying, and I know. So from my perspective, I should do what you're saying, because pragmatically, in the end, what I would like to do is have the best outcome for the patient, and whether or not my colleagues have a love for truth, I could give a fuck less, right? So actually, what I really want is what's good for the patient. I'm just saying, from an education standpoint, if I was teaching in a university, when I was teaching, I always tried to instill in my students that desire to investigate and to question and to understand that there is no answer. All we have is evidence and models for our universe. We don't don't know everything yet. Anyways, so sorry for the rant, but I'm just saying this reminds me of a conversation I had with my boss. This happened to me at work.
This is a good rant. In the educational setting, I think it's very important for students one of the things that faculty members are terrible at is communicating emotionally to students. If you see a student as an emotional block to recognizing a fact, recognizing the truth of reality, what faculty members do typically is beat them over the head with more facts. That's not going to work. That's what alienates students. That's what causes them to think that professors are the liberal academia, worst people in the world, whatever, not the word, but and then the students end up going to and becoming climate change deniers.
Right.
Who wants that? Who wants that outcome?
Scott Pruitt.
Can't. Sure. Yes. So who wants? Right. We as skeptics don't want the outcome. So this is all about outcome. We want to be consequentialists. We want to look at things and see the consequences of our actions. Standing on principles is deontological. So deontology is, looking at rules and guidelines and thinking I should follow these rules and guidelines just because they're there. Whereas consequentialism is what consequences do I want to achieve, regardless of whatever the rules and guidelines are. And so if we want to achieve the consequence of people believing in the facts and caring about the facts, because part of eGRIP is positive reinforcement. You give people positive reinforcement for orienting toward accurate information. And that's the way you build up positive emotions around truth and facts. So that's the only way to do so, is to have them associate positive emotions with orienting toward truth, with orienting toward facts. And so that's the strategy that you want to follow. eGRIP or other similar strategies where you address the emotional blocks that people have around believing the facts.
And you're saying that eGRIP is evidence-based? Like this is, can you speak to that at all? This is a practice that was, how do you know it works?
Oh gosh.
Other than anecdotally.
I know it works. So it's all based on research. So you would know this term, face validity. So it's based on research in each of these, looking at emotions, goals, rapport, information, positive reinforcement, which is all cited in the book on the research on which it is based. And what I do is I distill the research from ways of effective communication and have that single strategy that people can easily use.
Right, as opposed to well, as opposed to having to digest a bunch of academic articles on the topic, and
exactly,
you sort of a layman's meta-analysis of the literature. Is what I'm hearing.
That's exactly what it is. Yes, and you can see the citations for those who are interested in after each article. There's a list of citations of where the information is taken from.
Perfect. So I guess how long have you been running the Pro-Truth Pledge right now?
It's been since March, so about nearly 12 months now.
Okay, and what is the progress been like in that? Is there a movement of like people who have been working to change minds and effectively changing minds, even like say in the field of climate change or whatever?
Yeah, so we've been the Pro-Truth Pledge at protruthpledge.org, which folks on the Brainstorm podcast have taken, is an effort. So for listeners who haven't heard about it, is an effort to fight misinformation and incivility and unite everyone who cares about truth and facts. It's for private citizens and public figures alike to go to protruthpledge.org. Again, that's protruthpledge.org, and commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows are oriented toward the truth. And then encourage your elected representatives, friends, neighbors, everyone who you want to be more truthful to take the Pro-Truth Pledge. So I think last time we spoke was in the summer, and we had something like 2,000 people sign the pledge by that time. Now we have over 5,000 people who signed the Pro-Truth Pledge, and we have a number of prominent public intellectuals like Stephen Pinker, Peter Singer, Jonathan Haidt, and Michael Shermer, who have signed the Pro-Truth Pledge as well. We've had some really exciting development recently is that we had a national level political figure sign the Pro-Truth Pledge, a U.S. congressperson, Beto O'Rourke. So that's been a major development just hit within the last week. We've cultivated him for several months to get him to sign the Pro-Truth Pledge. And so that's been great. And we just had a study accepted for publication in the peer-reviewed Journal of Social and Political Psychology, showing that people who take the Pro-Truth Pledge are statistically significantly quite a bit less likely to share misinformation on Facebook. So that's been really exciting. So we have some now peer-reviewed evidence showing that the Pro-Truth Pledge is effective in reducing the sharing of misinformation. So it's kind of, when you hear about fake news and how do you solve fake news, this is a great way of solving fake news. Having more people take the Pro-Truth Pledge.
How do you know that's not just a correlation and that's causal? How do you know that people who choose to take the Pro-Truth Pledge aren't the kind of people who would prefer not to?
Excellent. Wonderful question. So what we did was we conducted a longitudinal study. We took people who took the Pro-Truth Pledge and we looked at their behavior before they took the Pro-Truth Pledge and a month after they took the Pro-Truth Pledge. And we found behavior change within those same people. So it wasn't a comparison of people who took the Pro-Truth Pledge and those who didn't. It was actually people who took the Pro-Truth Pledge before and after they took the Pro-Truth Pledge.
Excellent selection function.
Good question. Yeah.
Nicely played.
You win this round, Gleb. I'll get you next time. But you see how you like convince me with facts? Why don't you like make me feel better about it? My feelings are hurt. Why don't you like I'm not believing you till you're like nice to me and shit.
Hurt the feels.
Wait, no, I'm not a neurotypical. I love this new word. I'm going to use it so fucking much. It's going to be my most backhanded compliment I've ever given people. How very neurotypical of you.
It's like, why are you smirking at me, Lisa?
They're there.
So, anybody else got any questions? Thoughts? Observations?
Yeah. So, I think it's very interesting that you're doing this, but what indicators of progress do you have that you're breaking into people who normally wouldn't tell the truth, or that they have a lot of benefit to gain by not telling the truth?
Have you heard me say that the U.S. congressperson took the Pro-Truth Pledge?
I suppose that's a good progress. There are truthful congresspeople and
mic drop
and non-truthful
is like a
people.
career liar.
Yeah.
But overall, we had something like over 100 government officials, candidates for office, and so on take the Pro-Truth Pledge. So, I mean, this person who took it, Beto O'Rourke in Texas, is just the highest profile person. So, you know, politicians are not known for being the most truthful people. So, and the reason many of them are taking it is because private citizens, like the listeners of this show, are going to protruthpledge.org and are signing up in numbers. And then once we have enough people from each candidate's district, we go to that person, volunteers from the Pro-Truth Pledge, go to that official and say, hey, here's, 200 people from your district, or 500 or 1,000 from your district who took the Pro-Truth Pledge. How about you take it? And then other volunteers, just people who take the Pro-Truth Pledge, tweet to their congressperson, tweet to their elected representatives, ask them to take the Pro-Truth Pledge. When they know that there's numbers, there's pressure numbers, and when they know that whether a candidate took the Pro-Truth Pledge matters to their constituents, that sways the votes. That sways the intentions of politicians to take the Pro-Truth Pledge.
I don't know if the politicians' motivation for the Pro-Truth Pledge is as pure as everyone else's. I guess we can take it, but
I don't assume that it is. That's what the point is. That's why we want as many people as possible to take it, the private citizens who care about the Pro-Truth Pledge, like the listeners of this show, to go to protruthpledge.org and take it in order to motivate politicians to take the Pro-Truth Pledge. Because politicians, they don't have any inherent incentives to commit themselves to truthful behaviors. It limits their options.
Yeah.
So you need to give them an incentive. Okay, you take the Pro-Truth Pledge, you get a reputational boost in the eyes of those, 500 of your constituents who took the Pro-Truth Pledge. A politician understands that. It's a voting thing. Okay, well, I take the Pro-Truth Pledge. Is it worthwhile for me to not lie for the sake of getting these 500 votes? Yes, no. Well, maybe it'll be worth it when I get 1,000 votes. So that's kind of the math that politicians play when they decide whether to take the Pro-Truth Pledge or not.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting that our whole system doesn't incentivize telling the truth, and we have to create this different external incentive. But anyway, that's just how it is.
It's a bit troubling.
Wouldn't it be nice if our system was different? I mean, but our system, unfortunately, is the way it is. And so I would like there to not be a need for the Pro-Truth Pledge. I would like us to live in a system where we didn't have a need for the Pro-Truth Pledge. Then I could spend a lot more time, hanging out in my backyard and chilling.
Sure. How widespread is the Pro-Truth Pledge? Is it are you in multiple countries, or is it mainly in the U.S. and Canada?
We have plenty of people in the U.S. and Canada, but then we have people from around the world. We have people in, let's see, I'm looking at the Pro-Truth Pledge. So folks who are on the Pro-Truth Pledge website right now can go to the button on the top on the top right that says Pledge Takers, and there's a map of people around the world who took the Pro-Truth Pledge. So there's people, I think there's some 70-ish people in Europe, a bunch of people in something like 10-ish people in Asia, number of people in Africa, China. I'm just kind of looking through it. So it's right now heavily focused on developed countries. The U.S. has the majority of pledge takers, followed by Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, and then a number of Western European countries, and then also a few people in Africa and Asia. So that's the spread.
Okay. Thoughts?
No,
I just say everything as it comes to my brain.
We have a table full of no thoughts.
Yeah.
I have a thought, actually. So a lot of the distribution is for the developed countries of the world. Is there any methods for breaking into, say, second world or third world? Because it seems like a lot of people who are focused on making as much money they can for their families, or they have 7 kids, aren't likely to take the Pro-Truth Pledge because that's just something that they can't afford to care about.
Well, there's actually a number of people who are in developing countries who do care about this. This is obviously a democracy-oriented, so this matters for democracies, not for authoritarian countries. But we just recently had Pro-Truth Pledge chapter starting up in Brazil. So where one of the ways that the Pro-Truth Pledge gets spread, I go on these shows and talk about it, and others do as well. But another way it gets spread is that private citizens who take the Pro-Truth Pledge go out in the street and canvass to get signatures for the Pro-Truth Pledge. So recently we had someone starting up doing so in Brazil. And that's just one example of where there was a connection from a show this person heard, and he's like, yes, I want to start doing this here. So he's starting doing it there. So that's how it breaks into Brazil and so on. People hear about the Pro-Truth Pledge on some shows, podcasts, or read articles about it in international venues. We were published. There was an article about the Pro-Truth Pledge published in Singapore recently, for example. And then they take the Pro-Truth Pledge, and then some of them start doing signature gathering for it. So that's the way it breaks into these countries.
How many North Koreans have signed the pledge?
I I doubt that there was any North Korean society. Which,
It seems like
They
there might
need the
not be
pledge.
any.
yes.
What languages is your site available in?
Let's see. So the Pro-Truth Pledge, itself has been translated into French, Spanish, Hungarian, Russian, Ukrainian, and Portuguese, and German.
So it's a few.
Yeah. So whenever we have people who speak another language or native speakers of another language, we ask them, as one of the volunteer things they can do is to translate the Pro-Truth Pledge into their language.
It's a good idea.
For sure.
Crowdsource it.
Yeah.
Or just put it in Google Translate. That thing is always accurate.
Yeah, that's right.
You know how long it took us to come up with the behaviors of the Pro-Truth Pledge? Oof. It's taking all of the research on what causes people to be more oriented toward truth and facts and summarizing them into 12 behaviors broken up into 3 sections each, one about how people are truthful themselves, one about honoring truthfulness in others, and one about impacting people in their community. It took a lot of time. So we want to make sure that whenever it's translated by someone who's a native of the language or has near native capacity, so that it's really accurately reflects what we wanted to say.
Right. Makes sense.
Something that I'm curious about is the P on the E grip. What kind of things positively reinforce these truth-seeking type behaviors?
Good question, Cory.
Sure. So it would be something that would reflect the person's ability to change her mind in the face of kind of how challenging it is. Saying, hey, this is must not be easy to change your mind when confronted with this evidence. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do. Everyone struggles with this. But it's really impressive that you are able to do it. It's a sign of a strong person. And, so that's the kind of things that you want to do. Not in any way that's patronizing or condescending, but authentic. Because it's not easy to do. It's not easy to change your mind in the face of evidence. And remember, people who are skeptics have an easier time of doing it. So keep that in mind when you're talking to those people, especially if they're not skeptics, to talk to them about how, this is not an easy thing to do. This is a challenging thing to do. This is a skill to learn, to change your mind based on new evidence. Far from all people are capable of doing it. So it's really impressive that you're able to move in this direction.
Something that I've noticed, the skeptic community has a tendency to lean towards lacking humility sometimes. So I wonder, have you received a lot of pushback from people within the skeptic community? Are they actually accepting of this kind of idea, or do they just think, oh, well, I know how to find the truth, and I don't need this extra thing?
There are a lot of people who are in the skeptic community who are very arrogant about their ability to find the truth, and who are not willing to acknowledge that they have challenges, just as everyone does. I have challenges. Everyone has challenges with facing challenging information, but the most difficult thing to see is what you actually don't see.
Right.
So, things that cause us to, how do you, let's say you have a favorite political candidate and you hear that your favorite political candidate screwed up. What is the likelihood? You have a negative article about your favorite political candidate. What's the likelihood that you'll click on that article and read it thoroughly versus kind of skip it by and look for the article about read thoroughly the article about the least favorite candidate and how that candidate screwed up? That's a clear example of where people who don't do both are being disingenuous about whether they're actually skeptical. And, the skeptical thing to do is to read the article about your favorite candidate and how they screwed up and have the candidate be a little bit less favorite in your eyes afterward. Because, maybe the candidate is not as good as you thought she was or something like that.
Well, or you can
How many of us do that?
Right.
Well, sorry, I was going to say, or you could make the argument that any belief that you have should be able to withstand criticism, right? You should be able to read a book or an article or listen to a podcast that's contrary to what where somebody expresses something contrary to what you think, and what you think should be able to survive that if it's legitimate, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, really,
or to the extent that it's survive. I would like to frame it in let's go with the candidate. Let's say you have a confidence in your candidate of 80% confidence. One of the things that the article talks about, that the book talks about, is probabilistic thinking. We think as human beings, including skeptics, too much in black and white terms. So when we think about leaders who we support, we think, do I like that person or do not? Am I going to vote for that person or not? What's a much more effective way of thinking about it is, what's the likelihood that I will vote for this person? My likelihood currently is 65%. If I read an article and I see how this person screwed up in some way, perhaps my likelihood goes down to 60%. And that's a much more effective way of deciding what you believe and who you vote for. So probabilistic thinking is another thing that's described in this book. It's much more effective. It's much more aligned with real skepticism, which is accurately weighing the evidence for and against a certain perspective, for and against a certain idea. So
I guess
anything that you can come up with. So being able to take evidence against your perspective is really important. And like you said, if the evidence is not worthwhile, if you read the article and you think this article is not accurate, then you should still stay at 65%.
Yeah, I mean, I guess humans are hard, right? It's hard to say, oh, this human is altogether good, I'm going to vote for them. Like that's a much grayer sort of zone. But I was thinking more like on an issue by issue basis. If I believe that abortion should be legal, and I read an article by somebody who does not think that's the case, if my opinion is valid, it should probably be able to withstand reading that article, for example, like as an example. I mean,
yeah. I think that's fair.
I mean, I do sometimes try to seek out opinion pieces that are opposite to what I think, just to try to get, because otherwise, somebody like Donald Trump gets elected and you're just like, I'm so confused. I don't understand. Nobody thinks like this. And it's just because you're in your little echo chamber and you've never thought about how somebody could have any sort of different perspective. It's very difficult way to live when you isolate yourself intellectually, I find.
Yep, for sure. I do have trouble sometimes, though.
No, it's not fun, of course. And then that's why, I mean, it's like eating whatever broccoli. It's good for you, but you'd rather have deep fried Oreos.
Yeah, and that was the question that was asked earlier. How a lot of skeptics are too arrogant and they just eat the deep fried Oreos, and they think they're being nice and skeptical by talking to an echo chamber. So this is a problem. And this is something that certainly some people have that pushback. Oh, I already know all this, or I already do all this. And I observe them and I see that they don't, but they think they do. Because for many people, the label or the idea of being skeptical is more appealing than the behaviors of being skeptical. It's nice to think that we're being skeptical. There's a certain status and prestige associated with being skeptical. But the actual behaviors of being skeptical are often much more difficult than we give them credit for.
No, that's a fair point.
Yep. Yeah, when me and Gumby started the Positively Skeptical podcast, the first episode we interviewed Gleb, and then for the second part of that episode, Gumby kind of asked me what I thought skepticism was. And it's very important, I think, that we recognize that skepticism isn't a card you can buy. It's not an identity you can own. It's a process that we have to work through all the time and constantly be reevaluating ourselves and claims.
Absolutely agreed.
Well, wait, what if I get like a permanent I am a skeptic tattoo? That's forever, right?
Well, the tattoo is, but I don't know.
But I'm always a skeptic, it says.
It says right on there. Yeah.
What about the other tattoos?
It's just like, I was just making a counterpoint that totally invalidated what Cory said.
Yeah. The tattoo's forever. The identity, I don't know. Yeah.
Let's face facts. Even the tattoo's not forever. That stuff can be covered up.
That's true.
That's true.
No, right on. Thanks for joining us, Gleb. Do you have, I guess, where can people find your stuff?
So they can find the Pro-Truth Pledge at protruthpledge.org. Again, we need as many people as possible to take the Pro-Truth Pledge at protruthpledge.org to encourage politicians and other public figures to take the Pro-Truth Pledge and be committed to facts and truth. You may yourself be committed to facts and truth, but you want to signal that public commitment to others in order to be part of the solution to the misinformation and incivility flooding our society. So go to protruthpledge.org and take it now. And you can check out my book on Amazon, The Truth Seekers Handbook, a science-based guide, which talks about how do you figure out what is actually true? How do you actually live a skeptical life yourself? And how do you convince others to orient toward truth and facts in their lives?
Perfect. I think we'll let you go with that. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Gleb.
Thanks so much for having me on again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
If somebody can click the button on the Skype, and then we will go to an ad break.
Bye.
If you like what we're doing and want to help us keep the lights on, go become a patron at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. You can hear the bonus half hour that we record every episode and get a shout out when you support the show. Become a patron for just $1 an episode at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. Or you can support the show by ordering a t-shirt, mug or other gear from our store at caffeepress.ca/Brainstorm Podcast Gear. If you can't afford to become a patron or buy gear, then why not give us a rating or write a review on iTunes or Stitcher? Every rating makes it easier for people to find us. Thanks for your support.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians and everyone else to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. Take the pledge at protruthpledge.org.
Hey y'all, this is Tucker from the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. And I might live in a beer can, but I ain't no inbred redneck. And if you listen to my podcast, I'm gonna learn you something. And no, I ain't talking about how to marry your cousin and not have kids with 16 fingers and stuff like that. I mean, I actually talk about real stuff and teach people where the Bible stole its stories from. So y'all give me a listen, would you? Thank you.
Louise has emailed in to the show and she asks, God, if you unscrew your belly button, does your bum fall off?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I suppose I'd better give it a try, hey, Tony? Hold on. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no, my bum's fallen off.
There you go, Louise. The answer to your question is yes. If you unscrew your belly button, your bum will fall off.
That's from a new show called Conversations with God. It's a satire show. It's a kind of a comedy show about conversations with God. I recently met the person who does this show on Twitter, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Is
it anything like the God Twitter handle? Have you ever followed that?
Yeah. It is a little bit like that. The people, I don't know if the questions are real, but
yeah,
people are supposedly writing into God and asking questions for, and Tony asks the questions of God. That's pretty good. All right, so we've got with us a new member of the Student Secular Alliance or Secular Student Alliance?
Secular Student Alliance, yeah.
There we go. George.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. So I guess, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you come to atheism or secularism?
All right. So I grew up in a non-religious household.
Oh, wow.
I was never really exposed to religion throughout most of my childhood.
Okay.
And I found that when I got to high school, I thought everybody else was also an atheist. And I started talking with everyone, and they were all like, oh, yeah, I go to church on Sunday. I'm like, what? Like,
where did you go to high school?
Sheldon Williams.
Oh, here in Regina.
Yeah, here in Regina.
Oh, yeah,
so
no.
it was a really big...
You're 22, you said, right?
I'm 24 actually now. So that was ancient history now. But
I went to Sheldon for
like
a year, too.
8 years ago. Yeah. So I found that a lot of students were actually religious, and that's probably the first time that I was like, hey, maybe I should find some other people who aren't religious, and we can bond over how we don't have to go to church every Sunday.
Right.
Because I don't know, I want to go to church now just to see what it's like, but to give up every Sunday seems like
quite a commitment.
Quite a commitment, yeah.
Enjoy your Sundays.
So as far as the Secular Alliance goes, it was a very easy fit. I saw them on campus, and at the time I actually saw 4 different booths for Christianity, and then I saw only them.
Oh, geez.
And they had a sad little poster up there, so I said, I've got to help them. Or at the very least, I said, I'm going to go show my support, and why not make friends?
For sure. No, that's awesome. The growing up as an atheist in Saskatchewan must have been a bit odd. I guess until high school, you didn't really notice it.
I had no idea.
That's interesting.
I guess I'm not really like an atheist. I'm what's called an apatheist, which it's basically no difference. But
yeah,
it's I just don't really care either way. Which is
Apatheist.
Apatheist, yeah.
Okay.
It's like apathy, except with theism.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't know, don't care.
Yeah, pretty much.
God, meh.
We're all gonna die.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting. I guess maybe being in Regina had an advantage in that sense because my son, he went to school in Weyburn for the first 11, 13, 12 years, and he encountered religious people all the time. And I was raising him, to question things and think for himself.
Yeah.
And I guess he got kind of teased every now and then for not believing in stuff. And people would say that people who don't believe in God would go to hell and things like that. Like it's interesting that was something you never encountered.
Yeah. I don't know. As growing up, so I went to Davin School, and a lot of my friends there, maybe we were just like a very atheist generation, but I thought most of my friends were, and we would actually make jokes about religion all the time. So
jokes.
It's probably just because Regina is such a metropolis. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a real bad.
It's really diverse.
It's like New York, Tokyo, Mexico City, Regina.
Yeah,
that's how it goes. So I'm just saying.
The city of high culture.
Yeah, pretty much.
They sure try.
Sorry, can I derail something for 1 second? We were talking like how you can tell if a city is like a real city or not, and I've decided that in a real city, people do not habitually drive below the speed limit. Okay, so if that happens,
so
as it does, it's not a real fucking city. Just FYI, please continue to interview George. I'm sorry, that's all I have. I just wanted to. I thought of this after our last conversation about this, and I just wanted to point out.
I thought it was going to be an IKEA comment.
Not a real city.
IKEA doesn't make a real city. No, you have to be willing to go at least the speed limit on average as a collective. Some people here will speed, but generally, I'm going down Albert at 30 and going, why the fuck what do I live
What's
in?
happening?
Like, fuck.
Not to be too, I guess, ageist, but we have an older population in Saskatchewan.
Yes, we do.
It's all you fuckers. It's all you fuckers. Don't even start. It's your whatever. Sorry.
Well, the question becomes:
please continue to interview.
If he did have an IKEA, would people be going below the speed limit? So then, doesn't IKEA make the city?
No, there's no way we can support an IKEA. Anyways, there's no fucking way.
Yeah.
Not enough playing in this city.
No.
So you've been going to school for, like at the U of R for 2 years, 3 years?
I'm actually this is my first year, and I'm in my second semester now.
Okay.
What are you taking?
I'm taking engineering.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, it's
I can understand the homework comments earlier.
yeah, it's a lot, but you just got to do it, and really, it's all about the destination, not so much the journey.
What kind of engineer do you want to be when you grow up?
Isn't that the opposite?
When you grow up.
Yeah, when I grow up, well, I'll be 29 when I complete my degree. So,
when you're grown up and you're 29, what are you going to be?
An electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer.
Yeah.
I thought you were just going to go for hopefully employed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
That's the first choice.
Yeah, always the case. No, that's great.
Subservient to our robot overlords.
Pretty much,
That's why
yeah.
electrical engineering, right?
He's designing the overlords.
Yeah, that's right.
Ha! Job security.
What is
Life
that?
security.
I'll be honest. When I was in, this is a really mean thing to say. When I anything prefaced with that is gonna. When I was in undergrad, we loved to take our math classes with the engineers because you just brought the curve like way the fuck up for us. Like you guys are all like, we're like woohoo, A's for us because you guys are all. Sorry, but that's true. I'm sorry, I'm done now.
She's
There's
a physicist. So.
Yeah,
So we have to be
14 years.
So it's sort of like how you know how like Canadians are like fucking Americans, me, and Americans like don't even know that Canada exists.
Yeah.
That's like physicists and engineers, and physicists are like fucking engineer, me, and then engineers are like physicists what now? Like they're like they don't care. Like, they're like.
I'm sorry, there's too much money around me. I can't hear.
It could be that, or it could just too many people, or booze, or whatever it is.
Yeah. We're having too much fun doing our things.
I don't know. The engineers I've
make me
met
get
have
mean.
been more like social awkwardness.
Oh,
There's too
yeah.
much social awkwardness.
No. In STEM, the engineers are the party animals. They are the cool ones. Faux show.
That's true.
You know?
There's actually a pretty good split between party animals such as myself and social awkwardness. So in my first semester in my engineering class, I sat behind this guy. He reeked of sweat so bad that I was actually I was maybe 5 seconds away from actually puking in the class.
Maybe it's just from partying so hard.
You should have
Maybe
said
that's what that was
something.
from.
No, this guy didn't party that hard. I could tell just by the look of him. But yeah, so it's like a half and half. You'll see you can just look at another engineer in your class and you just know, are
He's
they
not
going
in the party half of our class.
Are they going home and studying, or are they going home and finding something to drink?
Well, see, what I think you'll find when you get a gainful employment in the real world, you'll find that those people have a really hard time coping with the neurotypicals in their work environment.
Yes.
I have a hard time, but I'm as a physicist, but when they hire people as medical physicists, they know we're going to have to work with normal people, and they really, they actually screen for the Sheldons and the whatever, because it's just. It's really hard. Some people you kind of lock in the back, but you do need people who can speak tech to normal people and explain things and interact with
and have empathy.
Yeah, and not even you got to be able to. Or engineering is business is hugely important. That you have to be able to talk to the CEO or the board or all the way down to the admin assistants. You have to be able to deal with humans. Like that is. Honestly, 80% of my job, despite all the years of school I did and all the technical blah, blah, blah. I get really excited when I get, I was telling people earlier, I actually got to calculate an equation by hand today. I was super psyched.
I did that today too.
It don't happen much.
You're an odd bird.
I was like, woohoo! Well, that's what I trained for years to do. But what I actually do is, I'm so excited about this.
My job, we're looking for any way to not do any math.
But what I normally actually do is quote argue with the neurotypicals about why what they're doing ain't a good idea, and maybe 50% of the time I win, but a lot of the times I don't. Right. It's a lot of it is those soft skills. It's very true. And it's very interesting how.
Actually, I just read an article about computer science where they're hiring more people from the humanities because. Yeah. They have that interpersonal action that computer science people don't necessarily
shower.
Right.
Fuck them.
My roommate's actually an engineer, and he's joked to me before that he knows 5 languages, one of which is for people.
Right. Yeah.
That's actually pretty accurate. Yeah.
What made you want to be an engineer when you grew up when you're 29?
I was actually throughout most of my life, or still rather, I'm still alive. I really, well, we'll see in 5 years. But I love history, and I loved always reading about it. When I was in elementary school, I think we were talking about this. When this guy's 27, he's going to do this or whatever. Everyone in elementary school said that I was going to go to war, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They were like, he's going to go to war. And I'm like, what does that mean?
You aggressive? Like, what's wrong with you?
I love reading about it. And I love reading about just all of human history, obviously. But I found that it's really hard to get a job with a history degree.
Do you have a history degree?
No.
Not yet.
Maybe not yet. Maybe I'll go back for another 4 after I'm 29. But
doesn't Leo? No, Leo has a religion degree and he's getting poli-sci now.
Yeah, religious studies.
We have a guy
and now he's
who's
going
like
poli-sci.
that. Anyways, continue.
So I couldn't really get a job doing that, and in between Sheldon and when I was 19 or something, so I dropped out of Sheldon and I went back to adult campus, and then I started doing a lot of my sciences there. And I actually found that I loved doing math. It was so much easier when I would actually show up for every class.
Some people love doing math.
Oh, I love
goes.
it. And it's really hard a lot of the time, but just understanding it, and it's, I don't know, it's like a jubilee that I don't get from anything else. But
see.
Once I figured that out, 2 odd birds doesn't make it less odd.
We're even
Shut
birds.
Up,
yeah, even birds now.
Yeah. But so I found that I could
still prime.
Really
2
do
is the
that.
only even prime number.
That is actually kind of cool. I never
Unless
thought about it
you
like that.
count 0 as prime as even. I don't know. It's divisible by 2.
Well, you can.
Anyways,
it's even or odd.
Everything is divisible by 2.
It's divisible by 2 and you get an integer, which is normally how you.
I'm just a banker.
Yeah, so I.
You divide $2.
He knows nothing about math.
$2 divide it into 2, and you still have dollars. You don't have any cents. You see, that's
integers
that's
work.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's integers.
So then you decided to go and be an engineer.
Yeah. So
Why not?
Why not? Yeah.
Do it.
And I found that it's hard, but you just have to work at it, and we'll see what I'm saying in a few years. Maybe won't have any more hair or something. I don't know.
Is that a jab at me? I feel like that's a jab at me.
That's if you go into banking.
I'm going to pretend I'm not going bald.
No, it's just a face, guys.
And so while I'm at the University of Regina, I figure why not indulge myself in stuff I've always been interested in, politics, history, that sort of thing.
For sure.
And so, I've been searching. I'm actually the president of the UR Neoliberal Club at the university. It's a one-man show
You're
right
the president
now.
of the what?
It's called the Neoliberal Club.
The Neoliberal Club. And you can't seem to get anyone else to join this club. Eh? As appealing as that sounds.
Yeah, it's I don't know.
What is a neoliberal?
It has the word liberal in this province. That's never going to fly.
Yeah.
But a neoliberal is not a liberal. Please continue and explain this.
Okay, so
As normal people would understand what liberal is.
there's
It is not Justin Trudeau.
no, actually, Justin Trudeau is
Yeah,
neoliberal.
actually, he
Really?
would be a neoliberal.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
So when
what is a
sorry, you
neoliberal?
go ahead and explain your definition,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I will tell you what I think.
So, neoliberal has been a political swear word for a while now. And if I was to, well, without getting too technical or into it, I guess, but if you're familiar with what happened in Germany after World War II is a lot of the people who are now in charge of the West German state, they said that we need a form of liberalism that still includes the state to make sure that markets perform optimally and no one's getting, fucked over. And they called themselves the ordo-liberals, and they were very successful because under their tenures, for a lot of West German history, they grew the GDP, or grew the West German GDP by leaps and bounds by 5%, 7%, 8% every year. And everyone calls it the German economic miracle. And we neoliberals, we call them neoliberals now because very much modern-day neoliberals associate with ordo-liberals, or the idea that unchecked markets can definitely be a very big danger to them, to societies that hold on to them. Yeah. So, for instance, like a 1929 stock market crash, that's more in the realm of classical liberalism, where they said, "Oh, we have laissez-faire. The government should not be intervening at all," and it never really turns out that well, and that's because markets have deficiencies that governments can fix, and in the opposite respect, governments have deficiencies that markets can fix. And so generally neoliberals try and focus a lot on the evidence. I actually made some graphs and printed some stuff out, and I brought it with me. So I can just hand it over if you want, but I thought just in case.
He said you brought graphs to an all audio podcast.
It's mostly just for you guys.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Because I thought you were like, okay, on the x-axis.
These are my personal y-axis. He's like, these are my personal graphs. I want to share with you, my new friends. We'll share my personal graphs.
As an engineer, I thought I just wasn't doing enough graphs.
You could make some friends by sharing some graphs.
I'm going to try this new thing called audiobooks. But
all right.
Audio graphs.
Audio graphs.
Something that I've always that seems to have, from my understanding of neoliberalism,
right,
has always been that it's been a mesh of capitalism with sort of liberal social values. And I don't know if that's accurate, but that's kind of how I've always understood it.
Yeah, that's what I would definitely say. So modern day neoliberalism, you can sort of divide a lot of neoliberals up into, there's camps of the centrist movement. So there's social conservatives, social democrats, and you can guess which side of the political horseshoe that they fall on. Then there's true centrists, almost like a D&D term or something.
Chaotic evil.
Yeah. So ordo liberals would probably fall just a little bit on the left of this political horseshoe. And I use the term horseshoe because ultimately deep in the left, deep in the right, you're going to end up at the same place. And that's a state basically killing people that don't want the state around. So on to your term about social liberalism, though, modern day neoliberals, very much, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but me personally and a lot of mostly the social democrat side of neoliberals are very big on supporting things like social justice. Social justice. I had something else, but I'm losing my train of thought. So
no, that's fine.
We're here for a while. If you remember, go ahead.
All right.
Because honestly, how often do we derail? I mean,
yeah, that's right. I find it interesting because I don't identify as a liberal or neoliberal or even necessarily a capitalist.
Right.
but it is something that I have often looked at the political spectrum, and if somebody is pro-social justice, then I will align with those people every time in opposition to the conservative right. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that aspect of things, that's where my perspective kind of lies. Although, I mean, I'm really far over to the left. So,
all right, should be good then.
It's weird because I feel like on this show, I feel like I'm one of them farther right-leaning people. I'm like, this is a strange place for me to live.
Really?
My Sam Harris podcast in this show. I'm a freaking.
I think that it's often. Are our perspective is skewed because the Overton window makes people who are center look left, right?
When I'm at this meeting here of individuals, I just assume you're all left, and you've all created a spectrum within the left of how left you can get, how right you can get it left, so you're not so left anymore. Right?
That's sort of what neoliberalism is almost like.
Yes, and then trust me, 5 years down the road, there'll be something within you.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure there are already certain segments that disagree about various
There's
things.
social democrats, social conservatives within the neoliberal movement, just as there are outside of it.
Yeah.
You know, as I get older, like when I was younger, I took a class on political ideology in undergrad. I loved taking poli-sci classes, but as I get older, I kind of get less concerned about these like semantics. Oh, so and so is this? You know, this is what they're called. We're going to call you a neoliberal, and we'll call you this or that. I kind of prefer to take things on an issue by issue basis if I can at all. You know, and I try to say this is what I think about this issue. This is what I think about this issue. And then in terms of voting, I'm going to vote for the candidate that best aligns with the issues that I think are important and that I think is going to do things. But I really try to do it on an issue basis. And because I found when I was younger, I'd be like, okay, I'm this part. So what do they think about? What are the other people who think like me think about this? Oh, I should think that about this. You know, like I'd read magazines that was aligned with what I think I should think. And because back then there were these paper magazines.
Oh, I remember.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just explaining for our younger listeners. Anyways, and then I would read things on this newfangled thing called the internet, and my CD-ROM encyclopedia. And anyway, but now I try to think of things on an issue by issue basis. I think that's a much better way to live for myself. Like I really prefer that.
I find that I do that to an extent,
but then it tends to group you. Yeah,
yeah. Everything that I think is over in this region over here. So,
well. As my boyfriend Sam Harris says, but he often points out that it's interesting that you can predict, very accurately somebody's political opinion on climate change if you know their political opinion on gun control.
Right.
Two totally unrelated issues, and yet it's actually very easy to predict. If one believes in one thing, what you're likely to believe on the other. It's very interesting.
What could be related to how they assess facts?
Maybe. I mean, I've read articles that say that in general, people who are farther left in the spectrum tend to be less fearful, and people that are more conservative tend to be more fearful. So, I mean, that's
Although there has been other stuff that it shows that they're more fearful of just different things.
Oh yeah, that could be. Well, yeah. Yeah, but it could just be, what I'm trying to say is it could be underlying psychology. Like could be the way you're raised, could be, I don't know. Blah, 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 blah. It's just very interesting.
A lot of the left is very afraid of like anything that isn't labeled natural. Like it isn't, they don't like GMOs. They don't like vaccines. They don't like it's very, it's
very similar.
Great. Now I got that Simpsons thing. Oh, you're progressive, but not stupid progressive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I did for a long time. I tried to, I was always looking for a community. I tried the anarchist community, but they were too into conspiracy facts
and couldn't really agree on when to meet.
Conspiracy theories. I tried
the anarchist community.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
It's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing.
I know it's a thing, but it's just so
We're
funny.
We're supposed to meet every Wednesday, but someone kept firebombing the fucking place.
Was it you, Rene?
Fuck it.
Sorry. Everybody's like,
no rules.
Takes effort.
Wednesday's a rule. Sorry, continue.
No, and I've tried the atheist community, but then they don't think skeptically about a variety of other things. And then I was in the skeptic community, but then they're so anti-left now that I can't be part of that community anymore. So I'm always been looking for a community, and I'm always been moving around. And it's one of those weird things that you can never find your home.
Yeah.
I know the feeling.
I've been there.
But do you have to?
No, you don't have to find a group of friends that you agree with on everything.
It's tough.
Hate Sam Harris. I love Sam Harris, but we can still be friends.
You love Sam Harris at a point, Cory.
I didn't mind Sam Harris at a point.
At a point.
You made me watch an hour-long video of Sam Harris. I'm like, maybe I'll understand where Cory's from. And he posted on video.
What?
Yeah.
This is
after the whole what was his name? The new Ben Affleck.
That's a hilarious
So he
video.
posted an hour-long video on off Sam Harris' interview. I was like, I'll give this a shot so I can get a different perspective.
Yeah.
Years later, I meet Cory. He's like, I fucking hate Sam Harris.
Well, it's a little bit like
don't tell Lisa she loves it.
Dick, but that's just me.
It's a little bit like 4 girlfriends ago. It's like, no, I never liked that person.
Yeah. I never went out with her.
You were engaged, man.
At what point does she
really liked her?
You said her moles were cute.
I liked her family.
And there's the derail.
So neoliberalism.
So neoliberalism.
Is that like Keynesian economics? I was like having flashbacks of like grade 12
Keynesian economics. So it's a lot of what came after that, and the economic schools of thought. They play a big role in neoliberalism because at its core, it's an economic way of viewing the world, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff. Philosophy Tube on YouTube actually did a bit where he talked about neoliberalism and the various types of liberalism. Actually,
cool.
It was very interesting. Although he's definitely not somebody who identifies as a liberal.
Right.
So it might seem a bit skewed if you're coming from a different angle. But
yeah.
What does the U of R think about Trudeau? I'm just curious.
I think a lot of, I don't know. I haven't really asked too many people about Trudeau specifically. I actually, I don't want to say that. I met this girl and
nice.
She was something else.
Where is Angela? Sorry.
She was okay, so you're asking what the U of R thinks about Justin Trudeau. She was, I would say, an outlier in this respect, but I asked her about it because one of her favorite things was triggering liberals. So
oh my God!
I said, So I said, oh, I'm a neoliberal. I don't think she knew what that meant.
I didn't either till we talked. Right? So.
and then I was like, so like, why do you like triggering liberals? And she went into this big rant about how SJWs are supporting Sharia law and trying to force it.
Because she has no idea what she's talking about. That's why.
And so I got this.
I thought there'd be some logic behind this, right?
No, I got this big paragraph, and like the second I saw it, I wasn't even angry. I just felt so sorry for her because she grew up, and that's just her parents talking through her, and I was like, I don't know what I should be doing here. So instead of being like, hey, you're actually a fucking idiot, I decided, I was like, oh, interesting. Like, this is the SJWs I've met. None of them have ever really supported Sharia law. And I tried to keep the conversation going. And then I said that I don't have a problem with identity politics. And then she stopped messaging me. So
it went nowhere.
That's,
right?
No
so that's
second
just how
date.
it goes.
No.
I don't think there was a first date at all.
I would not want to go on a date with that
Was
girl.
it Tony? What's that chick's name? The blonde chick who's dumb and yells.
Tommy Laren.
Tommy Laren.
Yeah.
Was it her?
Tommy Laren.
Saskatchewan.
I don't think
so. Yeah, that is Saskatchewan, right?
No,
there.
that'd be Laura Southern you're thinking of.
Oh, Laura Southern.
No, the Tommy something.
They're the
She's got
same
blonde
person.
hair.
Just different ages.
I don't know that. I don't know. I only know the
They're
annoying
actually
blonde
very
one.
similar. They're not.
I don't
you're
know.
not really
Lauren
wrong.
Southern and Tommy Lauren are the same
Okay,
person.
so when I said that I like to listen or talk, listen to arguments by people who have opposing arguments to me, I actually find that's fine. But I won't do it for people like her, where it's all just based on emotion. She's not actually making an argument. She's just being dumb. Like I think I don't have time for that.
Yeah,
shit.
I can disagree with somebody who writes an article and has points.
Yeah.
As opposed to, have you heard that liberals are against bread now? They hate grain. They're trying to kill Saskatchewan.
Anybody who rolls their eyes as they, I don't. I mean, I guess we do that. So
anybody who uses the word triggering liberals is pretty much done.
I don't think you two were meant to be, dude.
No, not at all.
I figured that out.
There's a neoliberal out there for you.
Oh, I hope so. We'll see.
Or not, but somebody you can get along with.
Yeah, someone I can get along with.
Maybe a nice, quiet socialist.
That's nice, honey.
See, the problem is you're not supposed to go into a relationship thinking that you're going to be able to change the person. So I don't think that would work either.
I think you can have a relationship with somebody who has a different set of political, whatever, opinions than you.
Yeah.
I don't see why not. But
You just agree to
question
disagree.
about values and
Certain- yeah.
certain things. So probably not every. You might have a lot of problems otherwise. Anyways,
It's when I was first separated, I dated a woman for a while who was believed in ghosts,
Okay.
and that didn't work.
Yeah, Cory, I don't think it
was that a deal breaker for you? Was
Pretty
that
much,
it?
yeah.
Wow.
That was it.
Like she literally believed in ghosts.
Yeah.
When I
That says something about.
Well, welcome to Brainstorm, the relationship edition.
Could you date somebody who believes in ghosts? Call our number now.
If we had a number, that would be a great.
I'll just give you guys Cory's cell. Here, look it up.
Do not no.
When I started going out with Megan, we hated the term feminism.
Is that right?
Yeah. When you're
Like Gumby.
Like Gumby.
Yeah, no, it's because it had such a negative connotation beyond it, and we never did our research on it.
Right.
So when I first did my research, right, it's okay, so obviously I'm full of shit. Right? Now, explain that to Megan, who was like, I don't believe in feminism, I believe in equalism. I was like, there's literally the same thing if what you think equalism is, right? It just has the term female associated with it, and it's just crazy that people would think anything other besides that. I was lucky enough she did her research on it. When I tried to explain that to my friends, I became a social justice warrior.
Yeah.
Like they called you one?
No, of course.
You mean, okay.
Yeah. And there's
Crossed the line.
And that's the thing about community, right? There's things I have to give up in order to have friends. Like for example, I'm a lot of my friends are for trans rights.
Right.
Unfortunately, they do not they don't realize what transphobia is. And there's times where I just have to shut my mouth. Otherwise, every time we're together, we'll do
Right. Yeah. No,
right?
that's fair. Otherwise, you're constantly in conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have something I kind of want to say about that. So, growing up, not or being so unaware of how religious actually people around me were. I don't know if our generation was the first generation that had really gone through this type of schooling, but being against racism was a very big portion of going to elementary school and high school, and we were continually told, racism is very bad, and these are ways that it has affected people in the past, and how we shouldn't be racist, and that we're getting really good and we've eliminated racism. And I left elementary and high school being, I don't know, just kind of asleep about racism, about sexism, about transphobia, about a lot of these issues that are still super, super prevalent, about feminism. And or when people complain, there's no wage gap. And I used to think exactly like that. I thought, there's no wage gap. We pay everyone equally. What's the fucking problem now? And then I actually did some research on it, and it's it's not necessarily meaning that women are, or for the same job, which actually still this also happens, that they get paid less. But a lot of people, when they talk about the wage gap, they mean that women are socialized not to go in certain professions, and that does decrease how much money women are earning when they're 50% of the population, but 50% earns 33% less, even if it's just because of their own choice, which is what I hear a lot.
Yeah.
As, they just choose to do different things, so it's not a problem. And I'm like, well, no, it is still actually a problem. That's the problem.
Great
is
example.
Because you can't just say, it's not a problem because of that. Because they grow up a certain way and everyone tells them to do certain things. And they're almost groomed to basically act in a different way than men are, in the same way that men are groomed to act as providers for women, as if women can't provide for themselves. So I find that there's a lot of nuance to these issues that when I was bringing back my whole fucking tangent. A lot of nuance to these issues that when I was going to school were never discussed. And so it's when you'll get a lot of people, you'll see them online or even in person who say that racism is over. we got rid of it. Like, what are you guys all still angry about? Like, you're making us turn into the alt-right or whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, racism is not over. And I think that the Regina Public School, well, not just Regina Public Schools, but schools in Canada, they've in the past 20 years, they've very much tried to teach this teach what equality is and stuff like that through schooling. And I think it's been partly successful, but it is a big contributor as to why people think that these issues don't exist anymore, so we should stop thinking about them.
It's interesting.
I agree with a lot of that. Go for it.
Okay, I think that actually we're coming up on our 10 p.m. music break.
All right.
For live listeners and patrons, you can enjoy the next few minutes, and we'll be back for regular feed subscribers. This is where we'll end the Skeptic Studio. Remember to check out the Shift to Reason Radio next week and hear listener feedback, new patrons, and iTunes reviews, as well as our new closing segment. This week's music is Future Starts Slow by The Kills, which was featured in the episode 10, I think, of Altered Carbon, and reminded me how much I loved The Kills. A new song, Talk Talk by A Perfect Circle, and Radioactive by Imagine Dragons, just because.
Because you're going to Vegas.
Sure.
And it's such a good song.
All right. You can check out the show notes at thebrainstormpodcast.com and our website, brainstormblog.net. Thanks to our financial supporters, the Utah Outcasts, Basit, Will, Aaron, Daryl, Dustin Sucks, Lachlan, Lisa, Magnus, Michael, Nathan, Positively Skeptical, Rob, and Stephanie. If you want to join them and help the show grow, then you can do that at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. You can also support us by donating to our GoFundMe for the conference at gofundme.com/shift-2-reason-conference-2018. We're over $1,000 and we'll likely start booking things soon. Or you can go buy some stuff to support us at tpublic.com/stores/brainstorm-podcast-gear. They have much better shipping prices than other online stores. They are a great place for you to get your stuff. They have a sale on from the 21st till the 25th, and everything is marked down, so check it out before the sale ends. You can join us every second week when we broadcast live on brainstormradio.net. Our next show is on March 2nd, and our guest will be David Silverman, president of the American Atheists. I won't be here for this one, but Destin is going to take over as host, and I'm sure it will be fine.
Roast.
Thanks to Gleb for joining us. You can find more of his stuff at protruthpledge.org. Thanks to Dave for our intro music. Thanks to Aaron Rabbi for doing the new voiceover for the intro. Thanks to Alex Kepper-Murdoch for doing our ads. And thanks to Jason Camo for the outro music. You can find his stuff at aloststateofmind.com. Also, Aaron Rabbi does the Embrace the Void podcast. Look for that. All music played is either with permission or under the SOCAN license to play. For more information on SOCAN, you can check out the music license info page on our website, brainstormblog.net. Remember to give us a rating, a thumbs up, or a fave on your podcatcher of choice. Join our Facebook group, like our page, follow us on Twitter, share the show, and spread the word. For live listeners, stick around for the after show. You can go to brainstormafterhours.com and listen to the bonus content before it goes patron only. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth matters.
This is an opinion-based podcast. Each person on the podcast is responsible for their own opinions, and those opinions don't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of the panel. Any guests or anyone associated with the people on the podcast, such as spouses, partners, children, other family members, friends, or employers. No one person speaks for the podcast with the possible exception of Cory, and he doesn't speak for anyone else on the show. The Brainstorm podcast does not represent the views of our sponsors.
We just wanted to say thanks to everyone who listens to us, shares the show, gives us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or supports us through Patreon and Gumroad. We don't have a lot of interactions with our listeners, but what we have had proves that we attract some of the best people around. Smart, kind, and cool. An audience truly worthy of the titles hardcore and woo-free. Thanks! for helping us make the world a smarter place.